And I'm here just to provide some logistics, and I'm going to first just quickly walk you through just kind of the basic interactions and things that we have in the session. So we'd love to get your questions and interaction. So if you go to the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, you should hopefully see our Slido tool, which will enable you to ask questions of our panel and my colleagues and all of these things. And you should see the questions that come up in the bottom corner, and you can kind of give them a thumbs up. And obviously, the more thumbs up questions get, closer to the top they get, and we'll kind of try and take them in that kind of an order. If you happen to be watching on the YouTube live stream that we have, I will post, in fact, I'll do that in both the YouTube and in the WebEx session, is to post the Slido details. So if you want to go to the main Slido interface instead of doing it through WebEx, you can do that as well. All the presentations, the PDFs, will be shared through the event page. The session will be recorded, and actually the YouTube will be available on the EASA Together for Safety channel almost immediately after. So if you think that was amazing, my colleagues must watch it as soon as possible, literally within a couple of minutes, you'll be able to send them the YouTube link and get them to enjoy their free time this evening watching that. So thanks for joining us. I'm going to hand over now to my colleague Augustin, who's the real expert here, and he's going to run you through and look after you for the session.
So good afternoon, everybody. So my name is, as mentioned by John Augustin Klus. I am a senior ATM ANS expert here in EASA. So I am here for almost 13 years and doing the many stuff. One of them is standardization, oversight, and also support for other aspects in EASA domain. So as you know, this safety week is dedicated to summer disruption, or better to say preparation for the summer. And ATM ANS is a huge domain, and one of the aspects in ATM ANS is also meteorology. So, and we have decided that this session will be dedicated to the severe weather and the impact of the severe weather during the summer operations. So, and I'm glad to have the 4 guest speakers here. So, and I will quickly introduce them, and then they will introduce themselves before each and every presentation. So, first speaker will be Klaus Sievers. He is a former Boeing 747 captain. So, and he will look at the weather phenomena during summer from the pilot perspective. The second guest speaker is Victoria Fitova. She is the head of Aeronautical Meteorological Services at Bulatsa. So, and we will have a view from the Met expert on the summer, and so what kind of the phenomena we can have. And the third speaker will be Philipp Wächter, who is the safety manager from Austro Control, and he will provide us a quick feedback about the ATS operation and the link with the weather. And finally, we will have Chris Peregrine from the network manager, and he is the head of the operation transformation unit at the NM, and he will bring us to the network manager perspective of the weather impact. So that's introduction from my side. So, and we can start doing the business just now. And the first speaker is Klaus Sievers. Klaus, please.
Yeah, hi, everybody. Yes, indeed, I've been flying 747s, but I retired some time ago. And I've been active on the behalf of the European Cockpit Association and IFALPA in weather in many fora, like, for instance, the ICAO Met panel. So yeah, here's my presentation. Let's go to it. The next slide, please. Yeah, European Cockpit Association is about safety first and foremost, and of course all with considering social aspects of it. That's just the first words I'd like to say. Now the next slide. That brings us closer to the matter. 9 or 10 years ago, I worked on weather and had a vision that we need to have different weather in the cockpit, no more black and white, and that it needs to become near real time as possible. So we have 5 points, like relevant information, coordination, I want a map panel, GNSS, GPS needs to be looked at, and TAFs. And that's the subject of this talk. Summer weather, it's all kind of related to summer weather. You will see. The next one, please. So, relevant information. There's lots of information available. Satellites look down on Earth 24 hours every day, every minute. Hundreds of satellite pictures are being taken. Do they get into the cockpit? Rarely, but some do. And there is one option is from NCAR, National Center of Aviation Research in the United States, and they have developed cloud pictures that show the cloud height and convection intensity, and I had the good fortune of helping a little bit with that. Their clouds were tested in a 2.5-year project by the FAA, and it included American Airlines, Delta, and United Airlines pilots. And after that time, there was an outcome. Next slide, please. The outcome was that the relevant information in the pilot's hands, that would be the convection ahead, beyond radar range, produces different flight behaviors. It enables fuel saving, and overall, tens of thousands of flights were analyzed, less time was spent en route. And that is because, of course, the deviations were done more efficiently. And better crew coordination is a point that is very close to my heart. See, if you have the weather radar and see there is a cloud ahead, you have maybe 8 minutes, and then you're in the cloud. And if you have maybe 10, but that's about it. That's the effective range for making decisions here. But with the look ahead by satellite, you gain a precious time and can move to 20 minutes or so, or 30 or 40, whatever. Better crew coordination means coordination with the cabin. If you switch on the seatbelt signs, like bing, that's a matter of seconds. But what happens next, that's what counts. The flight attendants have to go through the airplane, collect the trays, collect the food, and make sure everybody is buckled up, actually, really buckled up. And that takes 10, 15 minutes, maybe 20 even on larger airplanes. So if they get a heads up, that's great. If you can tell them what the weather is going to be en route hours ahead, even better. So better crew coordination and improved situational awareness for the cockpit crew. All the benefits of having real-time weather on the EFP. I mentioned the NCAR clouds. There are others, like those done by the Hong Kong Observatory or the Deutsche Wetterdienst, and a few others too. So these have to be on the EFB. Next slide, please. Hot topic. Yes, we are into the summer. You have read the headlines. Damage and injury due to clear air turbulence. On that I can say that I flew from 1979 to 2016. And yeah, clear air turbulence, as you see on the picture, I experienced it twice. Once over Germany and once over the US sometime. We really couldn't discern anything in the instruments anymore. But it is not the clear air turbulence that breaks bones. Next page, please. What you saw was the clear air turbulence that just spills the coffee. The bone-breaking, injury-causing clear air turbulence that makes it to the headlines, that is when aircraft are in convective weather, in summer weather, in thunderstorms, or very close to them, or closer than they should be. And when you follow the news, and look at the incidents with the tools that are freely available, you find airplanes inside thunderstorms, inside convective systems. Okay, I've also been there, done that, but when are you there? And at what place precisely? That's the question. Pilots need to have better appreciation for the weather, and they need better tools to avoid the hotspots. Next page. This here is something that a colleague sent me, and I erased a few of the call signs in it. What can I say? You see a flight track, and you see an arrival stream to an airport, and you see a radar picture actually showing a severe thunderstorm, and the little dots, the sprinkles, they depict hail in this type of weather situation, and this weather radar set. Is it real? I don't know, but the airplanes landed with perforated landing flaps. So yes, it was real. There was hail. Not a good idea to fly there. Why is it happening? I don't know. Maybe not enough appreciation or super good appreciation for weather by the pilots. One option. Other option would be that the weather radar is not being trusted fully by the pilots. And well, I've flown with the new multi-scan radars that became en vogue maybe 10 years ago. And one second you look at them, nothing. Next second, a red spot. Or the other way around. It's a question of, is the weather radar technology really as good as it is being claimed to be? So why? Next question, please. The next slide. So here we come to the coordination subject, very close to my heart. And it has been implemented on a near operational system, I would say, experimental here in Europe. Weather services of the region here have come together and decided to issue convection advisories for air traffic management, air traffic control, and they do it in a superb manner. Much higher resolution, much higher granularity, and at better quality. And you cross-check the forecast against what the satellite sees the next day or the weather radar sees the next day. Yes, it's true what they forecast. That's a giant improvement toward compared to the significant weather charts. And there's one thing, it's not moving to the cockpit. Somebody keeps it on the ground. I've asked for it and I received a no. It doesn't happen. This would be something, a great outcome if this almost active product would be matured in a short time, maybe for this summer, and be made available via the appropriate channels for flight briefing packages. Really a great help. Next page. Yeah, the Aviation Met portal. In the United States, there is an Aviation Weather Center. The United States consists of, I think, 51 states, and Europe has a few less also states. There's a difference in quality. European states are sovereign, the Americans not. But the size of the area covered is similar. Europe is it's just nearly as big as the United States. Takes a bit to think about it and measure it, but it is the case. And here, the Met services in America, they get together, they have products that they put on display. Next page. And then they also generate aviation quality weather radar picture available for the whole area. Do we have that in Europe? Question mark. Work to do. And also forecasts. The equivalent of the European convection forecast is already reality in the States since a couple of years. So we need a Met portal in Europe, please. Get together. Join hands. Make it work. The next page. Space weather. GNSS dependence. 9 to 10 years ago, it was more theory. Nowadays, it's reality. LPV approaches based on the EGNOS GPS edition are being installed in Europe at a rapid pace because of the EU mandate to have PBN approaches, that is, approaches that are not based on ground-based aids or on performance-based navigation rather. And do they work? Oh yes, they work. On the left you see a normal day, red is good, whole area is covered, zack, done. But on the right you see space weather. Space weather, that's a new thing here in Europe. EASA introduced it in the last year into its rules, and but nature already did it before. So space weather can mix up the ionosphere, which mixes up the signals that go through the ionosphere. Bottom line, LPV approaches don't work anymore. So depending on them is not a good idea. And by the way, the space weather advisories from ICAO don't get into the pilot's hands. That's a point that needs to be settled. We need the space weather advisories in the briefing packages. Next page. So I'm almost at the end here. Okay, space weather. In this case, I'm looking at America. Blue is good, red is bad. And it should cover the whole continent. Well, it doesn't. There is a red corner, red right top corner. We have space weather impacts the ionosphere, and at the same time, 4 aircraft to flying to 2 airports are affected. That can be handled by air traffic control, I think, and they can use other approach guidance systems. But if you remember the last slide, there was a hole over the Paris and London area, arrival stream to the Paris airports or the London airports based on space weather, on space-based navigation in the future. Very good, but what if you have a failure for all of those aircraft at the same time? That is an issue for the future. Next slide. So, tough. Terminal airdrome forecasts. They are issued every 6 hours according to ICAO rules, according to EASA rules, but it's not the optimum in my opinion. I think that weather evolves constantly, and that if you have a tough every 3 hours, then the weather developments are caught in a better way. Here you see an example on the left, a 6-hour tough distance, and here on the right, tough every 3 hours. My suggestion, everybody in Europe should move to the 3-hour toughs. 200 airports in the Russian Federation do it. The 50 busiest airports in the United States do it. It's happening in Australia. It's happening in the small countries in Europe already, as you see here in the finished work. So that's the low-hanging fruit. I don't know if it can be done this summer season, but should be in sight. Next page. Yeah, this brings it together. We need connectivity. ACAS, of course, as the base. That's basic. We need data stream into the aircraft. We need weather radar training. We need weather radar improvements. The cross-border forecasts are a super thing. The MET model for Europe is probably for the future. And space weather needs respect. The more frequent forecasts, I would hope that they come soon. That brings me to the end of my presentation. When you look at the other slides, there are links in case you want to follow up. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Klaus, for your perspective about what should be done and how the future potentially should look like. As a quick reaction, from a EASA point of view, I think that the 3-hour stuff is fully available now. It's up to the decision of the service provider. So from the regulatory point of view, there is no constraint.
Good.
Yeah. So regarding the other aspect, yeah. So I don't want to, but maybe I can reveal that EASA is creating a so-called weather expert group, which should support the EASA in the future, designing the rules and progress to I believe, the right direction and expectation of all the stakeholders. These are the quick feedback from EASA point of view on your presentation. But also, if you allow me, I would have one question, as from your slides. You have referred to specific weather phenomena like turbulence, I believe there are also some others, if you can list them, which can be potentially dangerous for the pilot operations. But also, if we can ask you the simple question, so if you were able to change a single thing in the MET, what that would be, or what would be your choice, So
Yeah, John, weather can be dangerous at any time, very dangerous. So you can have icing of the airframe, of the wings. You can have ice crystals in the engines. You can have standing water on the runway, or you have a wind shear that pushes you down to the ground just before short of the runway. And weather is very dangerous. There are lots of dangerous phenomena in weather. You just have to know when they are there, and you have to act accordingly. You have to respect Mother Nature. It's stronger. And what would I wish for? Connectivity. Everybody, ARCAS as a minimum, absolute minimum, and a data stream into the cockpit, please. And if the passengers get free internet or pay maybe €5 or dollars per flight, it should be easy to get the internet into the cockpit too. Thank you.
Thank you, Klaus. So we take as a one takeaway from you the better connectivity between the all stakeholders in order to have a better view of the current weather. So thank you once again. So now I will turn to Victoria. And Victoria is a weather specialist, and she will present in the next few minutes some aspect of from the wet forecasting perspective.
Yes, first of all, do you see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, I will try to see what's happened now. A second, share.
No, it's coming. There it is. Yeah, you got it.
Yes,
Perfect.
it's on the screen. Hello, I'm here to present you summer weather phenomena from meteorological point of view, and maybe to explain to the people what the Meteorological Society in Europe make to improve the forecast, because we are in a process of improvement of forecast, of synchronization, better visualization, etc. But you will see in my presentation. Of course, in the summer, but not only in the summer, maybe during more than half of the year, it is possible for convective clouds to develop. Convective clouds and related with them weather phenomena have a serious effect on everyday life, but also they affect the aviation. Of course, we cannot stop or change the atmospheric processes. This is why we just need to getting ready for weather challenges. All aviation stakeholders have operational procedures to apply in case of summer weather phenomena. In this aspect, with competent people and enough resources and efforts, we are ready to ensure safe and effective operations. Maybe the interesting in my organization, BUATSA, Bulgarian Air Traffic Services Authority, is that meteorological service for aviation is in this air traffic service authority, like in Belgium, in Austria. And on everyday basis, we usually make a lot of conversation with our colleagues from ATC staff, from FMP staff. And for us, it's very, very easy to understand what happened in the atmosphere. Yes, but it's very important to understand what the atmospheric processes cause to aviation. And maybe if you see the convective cloud forecast, is not necessary to tell that there is a turbulence, whitening, icing, all the dangerous phenomena. wind shear, low visibility, etc. You see the charts, and when there is CB, they imply a lot of dangerous phenomena. But from this, how strong the convection is depends how strong the phenomena are and how many of them will arise. Usually, when we have deep convection, when the clouds are very high and they go through to the tropopause and they break the tropopause, we have all the phenomena with and they are very strong. During the summer, we have one additional dangerous phenomena, extreme heat. Usually, aircraft performance is degraded under condition of low density of the air caused by high temperature. And in this case, a good forecast for the maximum temperature and exact hour in which this temperature will happen is very important. On this slide are all the aviation stakeholders that are affected by convection, but in the presentation of Klaus and in the next presentations, the people will explain what the convective clouds make for disrupting the operations. Maybe the most important thing is overloads, overload due to unplanned sector or late opening of the sectors, etc. For flow manager, it's different story. They make different tactical and pre-tactical procedures for pilots and for airports. Of course, meteorological station make different warnings to prevent the things on the runaway because of thunderstorm. And the forecasters, they also are affected by the convective clouds, by the convection. Aviation meteorologists are not guilty for the convection. They also suffered from atmospheric process. Usually during the summer, aeronautical meteorological personnel prepare 45% more forecast and warning. And you can see on the diagram the distribution of issued warnings in the year. You can see in the May, June, and July, the amount is higher. Yes, the forecasters are very busy in the summer. They think about a lot of forecast and warnings. They make them and distribute them to the users. But can you believe that for me it's important everyone cloud? I can see the beautiful thing in this cloud, because when you know the process in the cloud is very interesting to see how it developed and what's happened then. Here you can see the updraft, downdraft, the rotation of the air, also the overshooting top which reached the tropopause, and view everything. Yes, it's dangerous for everyone, for the planes, for the people. On the radar screen, you can see also this well-developed convective cloud, which is approaching Sofia Airport with a lot of hail inside. And believe me, the damages after this cloud they were terrible. Also, when one meteorologist make a forecast for convection, he knows the main ingredients and the trigger for this convection. A lot of preparation. We have courses and trains to understand which are the local triggers for convection: convergence zone, orographic lifting of the air, synoptic fronts, sea breeze, etc. And usually forecasters what is needed for convection, and the forecasters see how many of the ingredients that is needed for the convection are available. On the first place, for convection, we need unstable air. Then we need to know the moisture. How much is the moisture in the atmosphere from the Earth surface to the tropopause? Then we need to consider convective available potential energy and to add the vertical wind profile. When we see everything according to our knowledge, we make the forecast for convection for everything, every dangerous weather phenomena that can occur in this case. And usually we make forecast and warnings. According to Intergovernmental Panel of Climate, the global warming is 1.5 degrees. And in Europe, in recent year, we have seen an increase of the period of the year in which convection processes are available. In addition, Meteorological Society can say that the convection is stronger and the deep convection which reach the tropopause is more and more frequent. As a conclusion, we can say that the main impact based on climate change is the increase in frequency of occurrence of extreme phenomena and an increasing of intensity of the events. And in the same time, everything is changed. The people change the habits, the society change, also the user needs. Operational user needs changed. Of course, all air traffic controllers, pilot, everyone from aviation world needs a more accurate forecast which is well visualized. Also, Klaus say this, and the people need that the forecast to be near to the people, to the users sufficiently in advance for tactical and pre-tactical planning. The synchronization and globalization of the forecast. This reflect on this, not to have a forecast only for one flight information region, but extended with surrounding area, and in the base case, cover big territory like Europe or United States. And you know very well the old-fashioned aviation methodology, SIGMAT. You can see this alphanumerical format. The example is from Madrid, but all the coordinates that are written here, for me, it's very difficult to understand where exactly is the phenomena. And I can see here only the phenomena in the beginning, very difficult to understand. Terminal aerodrome forecast, trend, you know, this TAF decoder wine, just like a joke. If the TAF is long 3 centimeters, okay, everything it's okay. It is 5. Be careful, or it's long 10 and more centimeters, the TAF, please cancel the flight. This is all joke, but in my opinion, this forecast is very difficult to understand from the users and from the users from new generation also. And of course, significant weather chart, this chart with white and black colors. Okay, it's understandable, but it's not so user-friendly. In Europe, most of the aeronautical meteorological service provider under the umbrella of ELMETNet and TICAO also, and in the recent year, under the umbrella of EASA, we make a lot of coordination meeting to think about new forecast, new format, and new visualizations. And now we are in a process of evolution. Of course, the evolution means that we started to make a SIGMAT coordination. Okay, you can imagine this SIGMAT coordination like a peak phenomena, which is cover more than one white information region. And for every FIR, associated meteorological watch office make SIGMET information. But now we make a synchronization before the issuance of this SIGMET information, synchronization about cloud top, severity of phenomena, direction of movement, etc. Also on the basis of very local basis, every aeronautical meteorological service provider develop a new products for ATCO, for pilots, and this forecast depends on some negotiation between the users and meteorological provider. Maybe the most important, the most modern in meteorological world, impact-based forecast. This is a good example of SIGMET synchronization, and also for graphical SIGMET. You can remember this alphanumerical message. You can see the message, but it's more user-friendly when you see three different SIGMET messages that are issued by three different meteorological watch office, and they are synchronized. They are in the same color because the phenomena is the same and the parameters of the phenomena are absolutely the same. Then this issuance of very specific forecast for local phenomena. Some of the meteorological service providers make this forecast on local basis, and the issuance of impact-based forecast. This is a shift from describing and communicating what the hazards will be to what the hazards might do. And maybe in this case, for impact-based forecast, it's important to change the forecast, the thinking of forecaster, because usually now we make forecast about exact value of the wind, for example. But in the future, we will make a forecast for the impact, what the strong wind can do on the airport, for example. And there is the place to say that every one of the specific forecast is not a product only of the meteorologist, of the forecaster. It's a product of negotiation, of conversation, and this forecast is based on user needs. If the user needs something, they must to tell to the forecasters that they need this forecast. And maybe the masterpiece of this synchronization under umbrella of EOMETNet from maybe 5 years, this forecast is produced and the territory is extended, especially last year. Now, this year, 23 meteorological service providers are included on everyday basis to make the forecast, to make the refresh of the forecast every day. And maybe this is the first step for synchronization of the products and the first step for good visualization. I strongly believe that this is the first step, and very, very soon we will be available similar forecast that is good in very aspects, in timing, in accuracy, and collaboration between meteorological service providers. Thank you for your attention.
Yeah, thank you, Victoria. Very nice presentation. So, and thank you for highlighting potentially some future, where the Met services would like to go. But I would have a specific question on that regard. So whether you can quickly say that why we are not progressing potentially much faster what you have presented. Is there any constraint which would prevent to go for the better visualization, maybe the Europe-wide forecast like you have presented, all these aspects. So if you just quickly can react.
It's possible to react quickly, but it's not. Now we are in the beginning of the new era of forecasting and visualization of forecast. But in the process is not involved only meteorological service provider. Yes, meteorological service provider have to has well-educated people and the software and all the system and tools that make visualization. Yes, but if the systems of the users are not ready for accept this forecast, and maybe the users are not ready to accept in their mind the new forecast, the process cannot be continue. In this case, maybe not only meteorological service provider is responsible for this process. All the aviation world must to change the thinking about forecast, and maybe it's important to about legislation. If there is a lot of legislation annexes that imply FICAO that imply development of new forecast that is well visualized, maybe in this case everything will start and will hurry up.
Yeah, thank you, Victoria. I think that we have to take, as a one takeaway that the collaboration and coordination across aviation actor in this regard is really crucial in order to progress, and also the regulatory framework should allow the better progress on that aspect. So we take it on board in EASA. As I mentioned already, we will try to create a specific med expert group, and I believe they should take this on board and try to progress to the right direction. Thank you, Victoria.
Yes.
So as I said before, now we have the third speaker. It's Philipp Wächter from the Austro Control, and Philipp will guide us through the aspect of impact of air traffic control and how the weather constitute potentially some difficulties in the air traffic services and how they have to cope with them. So Philipp, please, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you just give me a short feedback if you can see my presentation?
Yes, we can see.
Perfect. All right, so hello everybody again from my side. I would like to give you now a quick overview on the impact of weather on ATS operation. Since Austro Control is the Austrian ANSP, of course, this is very important and very interesting for us, since Austria is the home of the Alps, and we have a lot of convective weather, especially in the summer season. So first of all, we have to differentiate between two environments. So one environment is the en route environment. That means, in fact, weather impacting the ACC business. Here we differentiate between two main weather phenomena. One are the Charlie Bravos, the CBs and thunderstorms. And the second weather phenomena impacting most of the time ACC business is turbulence, as Klaus mentioned before, for example, clear air turbulence. And the second environment we will have a closer look on later on is the aerodrome environment. Of course, there are several different weather phenomena impacting ATC, like heavy rain showers, fog, snow, lightning, and I will go into detail a couple of slides later on that. So talking about the effects of CBs for the ACC business, there are a lot of important points I have to mention, so you'll see them all. I will go through them right now and give you some explanation on each point. The first point is that you have to take into consideration that when you have CBs within your sector, of course, this limits the usable airspace within your sector. And very often, for example, if we have big convective weather areas, the sector usable airspace is divided by 2, so we only have 50% of the sector airspace available. Usually, if you do simple mathematics, every sector with an effect like that has to be regulated by 50%, since you only have 50% of your airspace available. And on top of that, those 50 remaining percent are even more complex than before, because you have a lot of deviations from aircraft, you have a high frequency load, but I will go into this later in detail. As you know, very often if there is convective weather, ANSPs usually don't regulate by 50% because of the weather. So this shows you and proves you, in fact, that the ANSPs are really doing the best to keep the capacity as high as possible, even if we have adverse weather situations. Second thing is, of course, that if you have CPs in an adjacent sector, this can lead to a high number of flights deviating into your own sector or into other neighboring sectors. We're talking about intruders if you have a situation like that. So you see already it is very important that you do not just regulate the sector which is affected by a CP, for example. It is also important to regulate the adjacent sector so that they don't run into an over-delivery or overload situation. Of course, it can also happen that there are some aircraft turns without any announcement by the pilot, due to the fact that the frequency load is so high that he's unable to request a certain deviation heading, and he has to avoid a certain area. So he just does it and tells you later on. So that, of course, increases the complexity in the sector as well. And because of that, because of the unusual flight profile flown under convective weather situations, of course, you have a restricted use of at least the midterm conflict detection, because the planes do not behave as they are supposed to do according to the flight plan. Of course, also for arrivals and departures, pilots are very often unable then to fly a standard instrument departure route or standard arrival route. Maybe they're also unable to comply with a certain holding procedure or even follow a standard missed approach procedure, so that they are requesting when they're on short file and there is at the end of the runway or after the end of the runway CB area, they are already requesting in advance that in case of a missed approach, they would need an immediate right turn, left turn, or whatever. So again, early and good coordination is here very important. But because of the facts I told you before, as a consequence, you have unreliable occupancy counts, because if you have intruders, they are originally not counted for your sector. And you also have unreliable occupancy counts for whole traffic flows. So very often it happens, for example, that you have a squall line moving along the Austrian Alp region from the southwest towards the northeastern part of Austria. And when the CBs and the squall line is leaving Austria, across our FIR borders towards northeast, at some point then the traffic flow there is deviating, because the squall line is now there to the south, and a lot of aircraft then are entering our sectors, and we have a lot of intruders for the north and for our eastern sectors in Austria. Of course, since there is a lot to do on the frequency, you have an increased frequency load due to the deviation requests, for example. But I have a detailed slide on this topic, especially later on. Next point is that you have a lot of flight plan modifications. You have to do that because today in modern ATC systems, you don't even use flight strips anymore. So there are no written paper strips, and you can just put one strip to another sector because this aircraft is now entering the adjacent sector. Usually all the information of a certain flight is already embedded in your system because of the flight plan details which has been filed. But if, according to the flight plan, the aircraft was never planned to enter your sector or even your FIR, at some point, maybe there are no flight plan details available. And of course, this triggers a lot of trouble for your ATC system if you don't have any details about the flight entering your airspace. As a consequence, you cannot expect a flight plan adherence because the aircraft is deviating due to severe weather, as I just explained, and it takes a high coordination effort, of course, because every intruder needs to be coordinated with the adjacent sector. So usually the planning controller is so busy with coordinating all the deviations that at some point you don't even have a 4-eye principle. It's then only up to the executive controller to handle the active traffic. So you see, this is a very demanding situation, and the risk of having an overload situation or loss of situational awareness is certainly affected by weather phenomena, and that is one of the main reasons why we did a lot of investigations onto the effect of CBs or thunderstorms for the ACC. Here you have one example, a concrete example of a situation. You see all the intruders, so all the flights which should not have entered a certain sectors marked in a color. So you see, we are really talking sometimes of about a lot of aircraft in percentage. For example, in this situation, only 3 aircraft were planned to enter this sector, and in the end, more than 15 entered this sector. Of course, there are there's the possibility to improve the situation. For example, sometimes if you have the staff available and if it makes sense according to the altitude or the actual flight level of the certain aircraft, it makes sense, for example, to split a sector vertically. In this example, it would have halved the amount of aircraft then for each sector, and the situation would be then much easier to be handled. Here you have a very interesting comparison of the frequency load that is exactly the same sector on the same day, but of course another week, with the same amount of traffic. In figure 1, you see the frequency load in a situation where we've had a lot of CBs in the sector and a lot of deviation requests. In figure 2, the weather was fine. So you see it's very obvious that the frequency load is much lower, and consequently the workload is much lower if there are no deviation requests, for example. Talking about the effect of turbulence for the ACC and for the route environment, there are also some very important aspects you have to consider. First of all, the ATCOs have to expect a level bust or flight level changes without announcement if the pilot really experiences severe turbulence. Again, as with the deviations for the CBs, you have an increased frequency load due to the flight level change requests and the turbulence reports by the pilots. Again, if the flight plans are then, if the flight levels are changed, it can happen, of course, again, that you have unreliable occupancy counts because you have, again, unpredictable traffic flow due to the flight level changes. Again, you have a normal flight plan adherence that, of course, also impacts the midterm conflict detection again. You have to do maybe flight plan modifications. So again, a high coordination effort for the planning controller, doing all the coordination, changing all the flight plans, etc. And as a consequence, again, you have the risk of an overload situation or even a loss of situational awareness because the workload is so high to handle the effects of turbulence. At certain flight levels, that is also a similar symptom again, like with the CBs, because certain flight levels are avoided by pilots due to the turbulence reports or due to the weather forecast. And as a consequence of that, the usable airspace in your sector is reduced again. So now we are coming to the terminal environment, especially airport operations. You have, as I mentioned before, fog, rain, or snow. That, of course, requires, first of all, an increased spacing because the aircraft, for example, takes longer to vacate the runway occupancy time is higher, and you need an increased separation value. For example, then visual reduction of separation in the vicinity of an aerodrome is not possible because you simply don't see the aircraft. You have to apply full radar separation for all aircraft concerned. As a consequence of that, you have a reduced capacity. To give you an idea of which capacity values we're talking here about, usually if you have mixed mode operations on one runway, that means you have landing and departing traffic on one runway, you usually need 4 to 5 nautical miles spacing to enable one departure. And if you have to apply full radar separation, so you have bad visibility, I'm not talking about low visibility procedures at this time, because then the spacing is increased again. But for that, you need 7 to 8 nautical miles spacing to enable one departure. So it's almost twice the spacing needed. And as a consequence, the capacity, of course, is reduced tremendously. If you have low visibility procedures in place, several other effects will impact ATC work. For example, you're not allowed to give conditional clearances. Of course, that makes everything a little bit slower. You need an increased spacing on the ground. For example, there are a lot of different local procedures, especially low visibility procedures, differentiating from airport to airport. But in total, it slows down the operation to keep it safe. And of course, you need an increased coordination with the airport if you have, for example, snow cleaning, de-icing in progress. So the snow cleaning, with the snow cleaning, you maybe also have only a reduced number of runways available, and the de-icing usually, if you don't have a fully implemented airport for CDM, at some point the de-icing coordination is also very demanding. So what can you do as an air navigation service provider in case of weather impact from the long term towards the short term measures? Long term, of course, is, for example, rostering additional standby stuff so that it is possible, as I've shown you in the example before, to split a sector, for example, vertically, to improve the workload situation at a certain sector. As a midterm reaction, for example, you can adapt the capacity, or you can regulate the sector. That is not possible as a short-term reaction, because that is too late. The aircraft is already in the air. So as a short-term reaction, again, corresponding to the planned long-term reaction, sector split if the staff is available, or you can do arrangement with adjacent sectors, for example, to simplify the coordination, like activate a clear of target procedure. That means each aircraft is released for turn, climb, and descent upon contact. So you don't have to coordinate that as well. Or you, for example, put an additional ATCO at the sector if the staff is available, so that you have 3 ATCOs at one sector taking care about the whole traffic picture. And of course, you have to adapt your CDM process, for example, increasing or decreasing the capacity for the departure management, or updating the de-icing figures, or increasing the taxi time, for example, which is needed, so that all the actual timestamps and milestones are communicated as early as possible and as accurate as possible to the network manager. So what are the requests for supporting measures from an ANSP perspective? Of course, in-time accurate forecast of thunderstorms and turbulence, inclusive regular updates. We at Control, we have a very good experience on that, because in the summer season, we even have one Met officer directly in our ACC ops room to have the best coordination in real time possible. Second request is, of course, again, as my colleague just described before, a joint Met forecast together with adjacent units associated with the regulations coordinated between the concerned units, even beyond the FIR boundaries. That is very important. So we all have to work together. It does not make any sense if one ANSP is regulating the traffic down and the other one is not regulating at all, and they are close to each other, and at some point the traffic from A is moving to B and then from B is moving to A. So since there are no FIR boundaries for CBs and for significant weather, there also shouldn't be any FIR boundaries for the coordinated regulations. We also need, of course, sufficient number of trained staff, so enough ATCOs to handle the situation from an ANSP perspective, and we need better or similar cooperating ATC systems in Europe to improve the automated data exchange with all adjacent units, so that we can decrease the amount of verbal coordination from one sector to another. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you, Philip, for bringing the ATS perspective here and the impact of the weather on the daily operation from ATC perspective. I noticed one aspect from your slide, that the interoperability of the system, is definitely needed for the future as well. So I believe that there is a lot of going on in this aspect across the Europe, also from EASA perspective. But listening to your presentation, and you have several times mentioned that you closely monitor all these occurrences or potential occurrences, regarding the contribution of weather. Could you just provide a short feedback or the highlights, how many potentially occurrences got a contributory factor of the weather? And if I turn it to also what was said by Victoria, that we have climate change and the increase. So whether you can see, based on the recent years, some trend having more weather impact on the occurrences as well.
Certainly. Back in the year 2000, in the years 2018 and 2019, overload situations have been a very important aspect for us. About 2/3 of all safety incidents in the ACC have been dealing with overload or over delivery situations, and in more than 80% of all of these occurrences, the weather was certainly contributing because of all the aspects I've just mentioned to the overload situation. Luckily, we did our homework in 2020 and 2021, and we improved a lot. We implemented a lot of new technical features. We adopted a lot of procedures. And in 2022, in the summer 2022, we had, for the summertime, the highest amount of traffic we've ever had. We had more traffic than in the summer of 2019. And we've had almost no overload situations, luckily, because of the very good and direct coordination with our Met service provider, and because we implemented a lot of features like, for example, the quick flight plan functionality to handle an intruder properly. That is just one example out of, I think, 15 recommendations we did. And regarding the climate change and the trend, so luckily the trend is very good because we did a lot. But of course, we see that the weather phenomena are getting more and more intense, and that, from my point of view, creates the need towards an FIR boundary overlapping regulation if we have weather situations like that. So it is not enough if just one sector or one ANSP or one ACC is trying to do the best to keep the traffic alive and safe. Because of the severe weather, we have to do this beyond our FIR boundaries to continue to improve and to keep the good work up.
Thank you, Philip. And this was nice bridge, because the next speaker is from the network manager, and when we're talking about the regulation and the regulation over the FIR. So we have Chris here, and hopefully he will touch also this aspect in his presentation. So Chris, floor is yours, and let's see how the network or the network manager and the European setup for the network manager can support the smooth operation and then enhance also the coordination across the players. Please.
Indeed, thank you very much. Can I just check that you can hear me okay? And you can see
Yes.
the presentation? Okay, good stuff. So it's really, really interesting what I've been hearing, because a lot of, or certainly a significant amount of the things that both Klaus, Victoria and Philippe brought up are things that we have been trying to deal with. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of some of the plus points and unfortunately some of the negative points. As was alluded to just before, we do have a collaboration, cooperation, all of those things are absolutely vital. I totally agree with that. Back in 2000 and I think it was 2017 now, we've had two weather forums at Eurocontrol and the Network Manager. One was in 2015, I think the other one was in 2017, 2018. Klaus was presenting some of his ECA stuff at one of those things, and one of the outputs of that of those fora was exactly what you guys have been saying. There's a need for collaboration, both at the ANSP, FMP and aircraft operator levels, but also meteorologically speaking. At that time, we did not have a Europe-wide forecast for convective activity. And why convective activity? Well, the network manager, it's not that we're not interested in local meteorological conditions. Of course we are, if they require some form of regulation. But normally an isolated convective activity in one part of the network can normally be dealt with at local level with minimal coordination. What we needed to be planning better for, and this came out of all of the fora we had, was those network-wide, large-scale convective phenomena that have been mentioned already are not only occurring now, but they're occurring with greater intensity more often and with much higher impact than they did before. Not only because they're more intense, but also because the traffic levels are much, much higher. And in some parts of the network, ATCO levels are not sufficient to handle that. So what did we do? The network manager worked very closely with all of the ANSPs you see mentioned there, plus the meteorological services of those ANSPs under the auspices of EU METNET. We also have participants from aircraft operators in some airports as well. But I need to stress this is largely an en route procedure where basically, and you can see now the coverage that we have in green there for 22, 23. It is effectively the area of the network where A, there is the most of the traffic, and B, there is most of the convective activity. We're not ignoring Scandinavia by any means, but in terms of impact, it's not a major area. Although if they do have phenomena there, we would, of course, we do in fact include them where necessary. What has been mentioned already is this, and it's been very pleasing to hear that this forecast is used, is important, is useful to people. What it basically is that we wanted to start off with a Europe-wide forecast that everybody could buy into, and this is crucial. Many ANSPs, for lots of reasons, regulatory, politically have their own weather services which they must use. So if we were then to buy an off-the-shelf weather forecast, which are available, then it would be quite understandable if Bolatsa, Romatsa, ProControl, whoever it might be, turned around and said, sorry, but we can't use that forecast. We can't be participating in a procedure that uses a forecast that doesn't involve our particular meteorological organization. So it was quite a feat of cooperation and collaboration. EUMetNet have been absolutely fantastic in helping us produce this forecast. The other thing about it is that it's a day-1 forecast plus updates on the day of operation. It was crucial also, and this is not only a plus but also a negative. It was crucial that we started planning at day -1 because European airspace is incredibly complicated. It is much more complicated than the American system because of the reasons that Klaus gave. You know, we're sovereign states, different ways of doing things, much more dense airspace. America is dense on the coast, but in the middle, less so. We have far more airspace restrictions. We cannot so easily reroute traffic over huge distances that we can do in the States. So we have challenges that we need to start planning for. Planning at day -1, then updating as we go. And the third aspect of this procedure is that this forecast is simple. It is not designed to be used by meteorological experts, but it is simple. It is simply there to note where convective activity is expected, the intensity of that convective activity, and to act therefore as a trigger for some form of collaboration. And you can see that there's a matrix there in the bottom right-hand corner of each of those forecasts, which basically is showing the likelihood on the y-axis and the if you like, the widespreadness, for want of a better English word, of any phenomena. And you can see the colors there of purple and red, which are where it is very likely and very widespread. So these were triggers of collaboration. And what we wanted to do here was when the certain triggers were met, we would do something in terms of collaboration, in terms of coordination. Something that Philip mentioned though really struck a chord with me. You know, we need to collaborate and coordinate cross-border over our garden fence, as it were. This is the intention of this procedure. Does it work? No, it doesn't. And I'll come back to that shortly. Okay, traffic levels. Well, actually, it's really about above 25,000. So once we're into the peak summer period, anything above between May and October, and again, I'll come back to that, is when we have this procedure in operation. Obviously it's open 24/7, but the higher likelihood we have found statistically is on Friday to Monday over the weekend. Why is that? Is it because the weather's worse Friday, Saturday, Sunday? No, it's because there are fewer ATCOs on duty and traffic on Friday is the busiest. Let's not get away from that fact. Obviously, special events, industrial action can have a big impact. We're all very familiar with French industrial action this year so far, and that has had big impact. So we will do extra collaboration when those things are there as well. So we come back to those colors. Why do we have the colors? They're simply as a trigger for some collaboration. If we see red or purple, we should normally hold a conference. And what is a conference? I'll come back to that shortly. If we also see a wide area of orange covering the main core area or a particular traffic flow axis, the southeast axis, the southwest axis, then we would either call a conference depending on how widespread it is, or we would have individual calls to FMPs. And then if it's any other phenomena, we would use other backup information. We may perhaps, if we know, for example, that a particular ACC has a staff shortage on a particular day, we may also coordinate with them about weather. We talk about conferencing. It's a very cumbersome way of doing things. What we're talking about and what we want to do is do the coordination in advance. We first of all want to raise situational awareness. Are you aware of this weather that is coming? Now, obviously, most ANSPs, most ACCs, most airports are very well aware of what is coming in their area, but they may not be aware of what's coming over their garden fence and how it's approaching them and how the other people's traffic, as Philippe mentioned very, very well, will spill over into their area. So situational awareness is the first thing. And the second thing is then to get people to plan better. One of the things that was mentioned was that we want to have regulations. If we need regulations, regulations should be applied at least 2 to 3 hours in advance. Does that happen? It most certainly does not. We see a significant number of regulations applied less than an hour's notice, and it is not unusual to see regulations applied with 10 minutes notice. Now, how anybody expects a regulation applied with 10 minutes notice to work is beyond me, but it happens quite regularly. When we call conferences, what we're asking for from everybody is not, are you going to put a regulation on tomorrow? Most of them would not be able to tell us that. But what is your staffing situation? What are the constraints you have on that day? When are you likely to make those decisions? And if those decisions are made, if we can see weather phenomena arriving at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, plus or minus, then we want to be able to we want decisions to be made around 11 o'clock in the morning, depending on the geographical area. And as I say, they're not often done. The problem we have with this form of collaboration is that it is cumbersome. We quite often call a conference and people just do not turn up. We're too busy. We haven't got time for this. I'm sorry, we're dealing with our own problems. We can't deal with this. And as often you heard about in logistics, DHL, FedEx, they will always say, the hardest part of the delivery system is the last mile, the last 1.6 kilometers, if you want. It's that last bit. It's actually getting the operational supervisors and decision makers to commit to this and do some planning. And I'm afraid it doesn't happen as well as we would like it to happen. But the procedures are in place. The procedures then very quickly, because it's we would normally have a morning, we would make a decision based on the forecast that you have seen. At about 9:15 day -1, we would say, do we need a conference based on the various triggers? We may well say yes, and therefore we would have that coordination conference around about 11:30, and we would then discuss with the various attendees agreements on those decision times. If you're not going to put anything on now, we understand that, but when are you going to make those decisions? Are there any possibilities of rerouting? We have a very complex system of airspace restrictions in Europe. Those of you that are familiar with it or heard of RADs, we would like to get RADs dynamically switched off or on so that we can funnel traffic away from identified phenomena. It's difficult to do. It's difficult to get another ANSP, another ACC to accept traffic from another ANSP. A lot of ACCs don't want to lose traffic because, of course, traffic is money. So there's a lot of other phenomena in there that we have to address. We won't have a conference, but some of the triggers are met. So we will have direct calls with each airport or FMP, and we will sometimes have 2 or 3 way conversations. So rather than have 5 or 6 ANSPs involved, we may just have 1 or 2. And again, the idea is situational awareness, some idea of the planning and when they're going to make decisions. And then, of course, the third option is no further actions taken because we didn't see anything that was necessary. And then we will publish that plan. We will publish that plan on our initial network plan at around about 1600. That is uploaded to our network operations portal, as are the forecasts. And it was interesting what Klaus was saying about he would like those forecasts available to pilots. They are available on our network operations portal. We do have a weather portal there. Exactly what you saw on the previous slides are available. At the moment, they're only available to participants in this process, but I am more than happy to look at, if there is demand for it, how we can potentially allow other people access to it. There are some GDPR issues and such like, but we can look into all of those things and see if we can make it available, because the more people see this stuff, the better, as far as I'm concerned. Moving on, we do then, on the day of operation, we have updates and we use live weather observation from EUMetNet, and we will continue to reiterate the plans during the day. As I said, this year we're doing 1st of May to the 16th of October. Tori made a very good point. We are noticing now, we used to end this process at the end of September. Demand is now that convective activity is still there going through to October. Traffic levels are still there going through to October. Met forecasts are in our operations room. That happens in many ACC ops rooms. It's happening with us now as well. We're in our 3rd year of doing it. We're doing it only at weekends at the moment. and we want to try and measure out what the impact of that is. And we do have new apps that will allow us to give live feedback, which is then promulgated through our weather portal to participants of the process. And again, I'm always happy to look at different ways of doing things in the future. We also have a new dashboard for giving that feedback. So that's our cross-border weather process. I'm more than happy to discuss that in depth. I'm no longer directly involved in it, but it is something that we think is heading in the right direction. Based on the feedback I've heard from you guys today, it is heading in the right direction, but participation is key, and I'm afraid that isn't happening to the extent that it really should, and that's the issue that we're having at the moment. Okay, enough of that. Very finally, I've got 2 more slides. One other process that we do, this relates more to low visibility that Philip was also talking about. When we regulate traffic, if you look at the top slide here, top part of the slide, you can see 2 aircraft. One is relatively close to, let's say, Vienna, because paying homage to Philip there. One of them is relatively close to Vienna, and he's got a takeoff time of 7 o'clock. The other one is a lot further away, and he's got a takeoff time of 4:30. Now, low visibility is predicted, and a regulation is applied at 3:30 in the morning, and that delays each aircraft an hour. So you can see the one that's closer in is now planned, instead of 7 o'clock, he's now planned to take off at 8 o'clock and land at 9 o'clock, an hour's delay. And it's a similar situation for this guy who's further out. He's at 4:30 on stand, 5:30 he's now got to take off, and he'll land at 9:10. Okay, but he's experiencing an hour's delay. But at 6 o'clock, the weather improves, and so Vienna cancelled the regulation. Why wouldn't they? So what that means is this guy's already taken off at 5:30, so he's already experienced his delay. The other guy at 7 o'clock, his regulation's cancelled. He gets a slot cancellation message. He's good to go, so he goes. He lands at 8 o'clock. The other guy lands at 9:10, but there was no weather phenomena. That was a completely unnecessary regulation for him. Now this happens. We have this process. We're using it for a few years now, but we've started to use it a lot more in recent years as part of our operational excellence program. It was identified as something that was a procedure that we had, but it was underused. It was really only used at a couple of airports. Heathrow was one of them. So we advertised it a lot more, and now it's used. Well, you can see there, as of 2022-23, there are now 7 airports that use this. What we basically do is that we exempt flows for certain traffic, from certain points of departure. That's different for each airport because it depends on the makeup of the traffic. It depends on the geographical location of the airport. So, for example, Oslo has a very different traffic mix and a different geographical location from Frankfurt or Zurich, and so therefore the flows that we exempt are different. But that's done with close negotiation with the individual airports. But the upshot of, and also the knowledge of their local weather phenomena. We wouldn't do it in an airport where it is common. And let's just take, for example, off the top of my head, Porto in Portugal, where it's quite common to have low visibility for all the day because of its geographical location. But for places where we know that it is relatively short term, but there is a significant number of longer haul flights, then this has proved to be an extremely useful procedure so that we no longer unnecessarily delay traffic. And we're quite happy if there are any other, if there are any airport representatives listening in, quite happy to talk to them about how we might be able to do this for them if they're not already participants. Because it does make a big difference, not only to the airports themselves, but particularly to the aircraft operators. So those are the 2 things that we're doing so in terms of weather procedures. We obviously also have weather briefings and all of that kind of stuff, but those are 2 things that I think are having the biggest impact on our operations. Thank you very much. I'll hand back to you now, Lisa.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And so we've got a network manager review and what the network can do. I have noticed, Chris, that in order to coordinate, there are still need for some phone calls and having participant on the call. So we would consider that in the short future or in the future, so more online collaboration would be introduced. And also we know that there is a new project of the network manager, ANS. So how you see this aspect from your perspective as a quick reaction?
Okay, thank you, Augustin. I think that's a really good question because I think Philippe made some very good points, as did Klaus. Coordination is cumbersome. It takes time and it takes commitment, to get on, the way we do, a telephone call or whatever. Someone has to be there and do all of that sort of stuff. So yes, we want to reduce that the difficulties of coordination as much as possible, make it as digital as possible. One of the things we're doing in the short term is that those polygons that you see of that part of that forecast that we have that you've seen on the various slides, those polygons are available in digital format, and several of the participants at ANSP level have taken those and put them into their own systems. So they can now draw those polygons on their own systems so they can see how it fits in with their own systems. That's entirely possible. We are also doing that with our own. We also have a system called EASA, which we're developing within our ops room, which will use artificial intelligence, which of course everyone's talking about these days. So if it doesn't destroy the human race, what it will do is the capacity reductions due to various phenomena. It appears that my camera's gone off, so I apologise for that. So those are those sorts of things we're doing in the short to medium term, so that we can better, first of all, we digitize and we integrate into your systems or into our system, but also we can get some sort of handle on what capacity reductions will actually occur, and that helps with better planning. When INM comes along, and INM is our new system, which is due to gradually come on stream. Basically from the first implementations will be the end of next year, but really effectively for our operation towards the end of the decade. But that will be a full digital system, not just regarding weather, but everything, one flight trajectory, state of the art, all that kind of thing. But of course, one of the things we're looking at, all weather stuff is integrated directly into the system, so that, and we can also coordinate directly with our partners in a much simpler and more straightforward way. So it's, one of the other things that I would like to say is that we are still looking at how we can do that. So if people have requirements, if people have ideas, we are listening. There are various working groups that ANSP, aircraft operators, etc., are members of, where we will be gathering those requirements. So all the ideas that we can get, we're more than happy to listen to. But yes, it's certainly part of our plans.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I think that it was good forecasting of the future and the future of the collaboration. So we are at the end of our session. I'm looking at my colleague whether we have some questions from the audience. It seems that there are no questions specific. Yeah, we've got some positive feedback at least. If I do the last tour de table, and I ask every panelist to say the last few words, and then we will close the session. And yeah. So if I start, Klaus, the last thought of few words.
Yeah, last word is, I think all of the colleagues here present, I learned a lot about the impact of convective weather on air traffic control, and how it influences sector load, and how controllers, forecasters are even impacted by it. It was a very good session, and it was great to hear that Eurocontrol is has followed up on the weather sections 2015 and 17. It was kind of like was nothing heard of anymore, but now the outcome is there. The outcome is good. Just, Chris, please make it move into the cockpit. If you keep it within the participants somehow, because of legal reason number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 5, that's only half the way. let's go the full way. Thank you.
Thank you, Klaus. And we listen carefully because we will pass the message also to our colleagues, within EASA that there is a need, to get the weather on board. So,
Yes.
Victoria, so the last few words from you.
For me, it was a great pleasure to participate in this panel, but I personally believe that the process was started, but with our efforts, we will continue, and we will be very fast to make this digitalization and synchronization of the forecast, and it will be happen very soon, I hope. Thank you.
Thank you for this positive message. Yeah, we believe so. And then hopefully the EASA can support such a development as much as we can. Yeah, Philip, any few thoughts at the end?
Yes, my big wish for this summer season and is that as long we have the tools we have, please everybody stick to the rules as good as possible, because the more accurate everything behaves, the better the steering works. So this means if you are on an airplane and the pilot tells you that they've had a delay for 30 minutes, but they did everything to be on time, requested every direct and flew with high speed, you can be happy for yourself. But in the end, this means that he was over point number A at a certain time where he was not supposed to be, because that was the reason for the delay. So please, everybody, stick to the rules, and then we can get the best out of it. Thank you.
So this is nice words, and this is fully supported by EASA, that the rules are there, and then we should respect them as much as possible.
It's the heart of the whole campaign. No compromise on safety. Rules fulfill the baseline. Provide the baseline.
Yeah,
I was very pleased.
Thank you, John. And Chris?
Yeah, that's really, I mean, you may have seen me nodding there with Philip. Yes, absolutely. I agree with that part of it. No direct flight plan adherence. It's all about predictability. If we can be as predictable in the network as possible, we can give stability. And that also counts at ACC. Stop modifying the regulations as much as they do. But of course, they modify the regulations because the times are different and all the rest of it. So that's one thing. So that's a whole different subject. There was a point that you mentioned about legislation. I'd just like to mention that because I think Victoria mentioned it, and we have done a lot of collaboration with EU MetNet, but there is a lot of regulation, legislation, call it what you will, that is preventing further collaboration. One of the things that actually prevents a lot of collaboration at the operational level are the performance regimes. Because delay is attributed to a particular ACC, they are less likely to collaborate with another one because they don't want to have to take any delay for somebody else. It's silly things like that need to be looked at seriously. And unfortunately, they can only be looked at relatively high level, but they have a real knock-on effect to people like myself and to people like Philip and Klaus, who are actually working in that sort of environment. So yeah, legislation, anything that EASA can do to support that, we really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, and definitely, yes, we will try to do our best in this regard as well. So my final say, thank you very much for your time, for your presentation. So I fully thank you, and yeah, see you on the next occasion. So next year, let's see what we prepare. Thank you very much. Have a nice afternoon and all the best.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye.